We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to take the law, we enforce it. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer, the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is April 19th, 2016, and I'm coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We are on weeknights, Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen live on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. And to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, SoundCloud, Tumblr, as well as the next day on Stitcher. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom. Exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. We are happy to hear from you, and you can reach us via phone, 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or via Skype, just send us a contact request to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. It's all one word, and just send your name and what you want to talk about. And to get on the air quicker, if you are calling in, just send a text with the same information, your name and what you want to talk about. And be sure to check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which links to our Facebook and social media accounts, as well as our contact information and more. We also post the archives to the website as well each weekend, just because they don't automatically post, and it takes a lot longer to post them to the website. So they post each weekend, but again, they are immediately available right after the show on a variety of applications. And on Spreaker, you can hear every show we ever done. We are actually a few days away from our 2-year anniversary. I believe the first show was the 23rd. I'll have to verify that, but I believe it was the 23rd of April, 2013, which was an hour show. I think. I know it was shorter than 2 hours. It might have been an hour and a half. And it was really just me. I think I had to use my phone because that's when I was on Blog Talk Radio. And it was the microphone I had wasn't working. And I had a lot of issues with Blog Talk Radio. But anyway, with it like shutting down or just throwing me off of it, I lost track of how many times that actually happened. But it was me talking about my ideas on freedom and liberty. That was really the first show that we did. And then it just kind of went from there. It was more of a test sort of show. And things have come a long way. We've had a lot of ups and downs since then. I believe I've gotten a lot better, although I still need to improve a lot. I feel like I got a lot better, and then I may have regressed a little. Of course, not back to when I started. And I'm still trying to improve every day. It's funny, I had some criticism from someone who basically it was more about a personal thing than it wasn't constructive criticism. It was just a personal thing against me. And the show that they listened to, they posted that this show sucks, don't ever listen. And they actually do radio as well, and they're terrible. So I can say that I couldn't even, for one, hear what the fuck they were saying anyway. But I'm not arrogant at all. I believe that I have a lot to work on, and I'm just, my words were, I'm not terrible. That's the words I used to describe myself. But they were terrible, and I'm definitely better than them. But the show they used to listen to was like my 8th show that I've ever done, which really, actually, when I think about it, wasn't that bad because it was kind of an interesting interview. I mean, I was kind of bad in my delivery and in a lot of things that you can look at. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But we have an interesting, not just show, I guess, week, I guess in honor of our anniversary, although I didn't even think of it this way. But now that I just thought of it, I will call it in honor of our anniversary. We're going to be talking about parenting all week. So what we're going to be talking about for each day, today we'll be talking about, and I know we talked about parenting in the past. We talked about peaceful parenting and unschooling and government schools, but we're going to look at some different things. We're going to look at the whole big picture throughout the week. And then we're also going to get into mine, and my fiance, Katie Reyes, is going to guest co-host the show on Thursday, who is also our official voiceover girl, and talk about our how we were parented as kids and how that affected us, and also our thoughts on parenting. Tonight, we will be talking about 2 terms that I really never heard of until the past week. We'll be talking about helicopter/tiger moms, helicopter parents, tigers more, I guess, specific to mothers. So, but I guess helicopter parents would be the term, or tiger moms. And we're also going to be talking about free-range kids, which sounds funny because that's the kind of chicken I get, free-range chicken that's organic, where the chicken's happier and they get to roam around and they're not all cooped up in a chicken coop. So these terms have recently, maybe the past 5 to 10 years, have been created. And with free-range kids, essentially, that was just going outside 20 years ago. It wasn't, if your kids went outside to play, you'd call them free-range kids. It was just going outside to play or ride bikes or play sports. But now things are totally crazy in so many ways. In Maryland, they actually have, I don't know if it's a law. They said it was a law, they being government media, but it could be a CPS, because when the actual parents were talking about it, they made it sound like it's a CPS rule, and CPS cannot technically make laws. So I'm still not clear on whether it's a law per se or a rule of the CPS. Of course, I've talked about rulemaking before, how the government, those who don't know this, it's an interesting little fact that the government over the years has, and I forget what year they passed this law. It might have been the 40s or the 60s. I'm thinking it was the 40s. I read the law. I just don't remember the exact year. But it was a rulemaking law which essentially violated it violated the Constitution. But what it pretty much did was allow government agencies to make laws. Now, per the Constitution, only Congress can make laws. of course, anybody who listens to this show knows that whatever the Constitution says doesn't matter. Government does whatever they want to do. And it really doesn't matter what some piece of paper says. They're going to do what they want to do. So they violated the fact that only Congress can make laws and allowed Congress to delegate lawmaking authority to government agencies. Now, people can argue that and say, well, it's not making a law. Well, essentially it is. If you look at something like Obamacare, the majority of the bill, and I read some of it, I focused on certain areas like the data collection, because that's what I was most interested in, how they collect all this data and built all these databases, and so they could track your kid essentially from, birth to death, especially with the public public preschool that they want to start that I talked about last week or the week before, that they're starting in New York, where the preschool, I keep thinking of kindergarten, or pre-K, that's why, because they call it pre-K, but is public and paid for. Currently not mandatory in New York, but I'm sure at some point it will be mandatory. So the government takes your kids away even earlier to start indoctrinating them and brainwashing them. And that's what a lot of this whole parenting and me getting so much into it and covering so much of it, because I have covered peaceful parenting. I have covered a lot of stuff with unschooling. This kind of brings everything together and adds a lot of stuff as well. And really, when I look at things and where things are at, besides noncompliance and self-defense, I think long term, one of the ways, or really, I think without this, things will never, ever lead to freedom, because I think this is a part that's necessary as well, is that kids need to be raised, besides getting out of government schools, but they need to be raised in a way that they are not owned by their parents and treated like property and treated like they are not people and they don't own themselves. So, meaning that what happens, and I've talked about this before, first of all, they have more laws and rules and all of these things outside of the parents anyway, because you have laws for anybody under 18 that only apply to people under 18. And then you have all these rules in school and those type of things. And then, of course, you have all the rules of the parents. So they get it at so many levels, and then they're expected to grow. Well, not expected, but anyone who thinks that it's easy to grow up and then actually get to a point where you question things and you think for yourself and you believe in freedom. It's not an easy thing. You also have the politicians and government media and all these things coming at you. So what I'm going to talk about more tomorrow is why I believe that that's one of the keys, or is it a key to somehow getting freedom or maintaining. I'm trying to think of how to phrase it, because at this point I don't believe we have freedom. So I would say, if anything, it would be a way to get back, or I really don't think we ever had total freedom or true freedom and liberty, but to get back whatever freedoms did exist and at the same time create a free society based on kids being brought up free and not being brought up as slaves of their parents or property of their parents. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow, but today we're going to talk about free-range kids. We're going to talk about helicopter parents and tiger moms, and also start to get into peaceful parenting. There's 4 things that I'm really going to focus on as far as types of parenting, and they kind of overlap because free-range kids is not really a full type of parenting. It's just one part of it, at least from what I understand and the information that I've gotten. So meaning that you could be a free-range kid, but then still be disciplined and hit by your parents. So it doesn't cover all of, it's not a full parenting philosophy, I guess. If you're looking at different, I guess, parenting philosophies, and I'm sure there's more out there as well, but these are the ones that I'm going to look at. 3 of them being positive, at least part of them. And of course, the one that's on the other side of it is the helicopter parents. But then again, even with helicopter parents, it doesn't mean that they hit their kids, or it doesn't mean that they put their kids down, or although it kind of points towards that. So that it's not, I would call it a philosophy because it's being overly involved, but there's things that can differ with that as well. So we'll be talking about all of those. Again, the free-range kids and the tiger mom / helicopter parents, I did not hear about those until like this week or last week, whenever I started, I think last week when I started doing some research and looking at parenting, and they had come up, and like, what the fuck is this? Free range kids. I keep thinking of chickens. So we're going to talk about all those things. We're also going to talk about a number of stories. I don't know if I'll get to them all today, or maybe I'll get to half today and half tomorrow. There's some important stories that need to be addressed and talked about, and we'll get to those. But again, all week we will be talking about parenting and different types of parenting and parenting related to freedom. And really the main point is that one of the answers to creating a free society and maintaining one? Bringing up your kids in a way that promotes freedom. Now, how far you go with that, there's different ideas and different philosophies, and we're going to see one partly today, more tomorrow, the differences between more of the radical unschooling, which also covers kind of radical parenting, I guess, or radical unparenting. I wouldn't want to call it unparenting because it's not unparenting, but radical unschooling is not just a school part. It's a whole philosophy in itself as well. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow, and we've talked a little about it in the past. We've interviewed Dana Martin, who's one of the more well-known radical unschoolers, where, to summarize, essentially lets her kids do whatever they want to do. Now, that's all within It's not like she doesn't talk to them and doesn't have anything to do with them and then just, hey, go do whatever you want. It doesn't work that way. And we'll get into it in more detail tomorrow, as well as the comparisons between peaceful parenting and radical unschooling and the parts that are similar and the parts that are different, and how both of those lead to freedom, and what aspects that I think will. But to start off with, I want to start off with free-range chickens. So free-range chickens are pretty good because they allow the chickens to run around and they're happier. And then when you eat them, no, actually, it is good, though, to buy free-range chickens because the way they treat chickens, I know the animal rights activists are like really into this shit. I just buy organic chickens, but most of the organic chickens are free-range because I believe it's just their whole, I won't say attitude, like they're in a better mood, so they make for better. But you would think that somebody that's mentally ill and the chemicals that are released through your brain, and I don't know, maybe there's similar things going on with chickens, but I'd rather eat a free-range organic chicken than a cooped-up chicken. And again, it's not really fair to the chickens. But that comes from really the same idea of cooping up your kids. Now, in general, from what I've heard, and of course I don't have kids, and that's what we'll be talking about on Thursday, what I believe or what my philosophy is regarding, future, having kids in the future. But from what I understand, I mean, because of all the technology, because of all the video games, and of course, TV's always been around, but computers, the internet, that kids don't really play outside or go outside like they used to. I still see kids outside occasionally. I saw them more when I lived in an apartment complex. I would see kids outside riding bikes and stuff like that. And I would see kids that were young. And you know what? I didn't think nothing of it. I would see probably kids as young as 6 or 7 or 5, outside riding bikes, just playing, doing whatever. It was during the day, and they were with other kids, but I didn't even think anything about it. I didn't give it a second thought. Now, a lot of what's going on today, and we've talked about the police and that whole aspect. I'm not really going to focus too much on that. But there are people, and we've talked about it before, and story after story, that are being arrested or having their kids taken away because they let their kids go out by themselves. So, as I mentioned, that law again, I don't know if it's a law or a statute of the CPS or of the state or not. I'm not sure, but these parents got charged with a crime. CPS got involved, and first they threatened them, and now they had to sign a thing that said they took their kids and made them sign a thing that said their kids cannot be outside without their supervision. And then I guess they took it to court, and I believe they won. But still, I mean, they have to hire a lawyer and just go through all that shit, and it's just ridiculous. I think one was 9, the oldest was 9, and his sister was like 6, and they just walked down the street to the park. And part of it, and this is what there's a woman. Shit, I can't really pronounce her fucking last name, and I had it written down too, but she actually she's the free range kids lady. I will get her name later in the show. I had her name written down and I fucking can't find it right now. But she was actually called the worst parent in the world, I guess. So, well, that's where I can get her name. She said if you actually Google worst parent in the world, that you get like 34 search results with her name on them because of what she did regarding free range kids. I guess she copywrote that, which that doesn't sound too for somebody that doesn't believe in copyright and believe it's in freedom. Now, I don't know what she does outside of that, so I don't know how much she believes in freedom, but from what I understand, she copywrote free range kids, the saying somehow. I don't know how you can copyright that anyway. But if you enter in Google, I'm going to actually try this because I didn't try it. Worst parent. Oh, let's try worst parent ever. Worst parent in the world. Well, there's a list of 15. It may have changed since she, I'm sure she's in the worst 15, right? Well, what she did essentially was her son, I believe he was 9 at the time, and he said, I want to go on the subway. And by myself. And they had thought about it and they said, fine. And he did. And of course, there was no problem. But she was a writer for a paper. And I believe she had got fired. I mean, I'm looking at these people on the 15 worst parents ever. I mean, they're way, there's people that like raped that were guilty of rape and all of this other stuff. But she let her son on the subway and just ride on the subway, and that was it, by himself. Because she felt like, okay, what's the big deal? I believe that, if he wants to do it and he's old enough, that she believed. And she let him ride on the subway by himself. And he did, and nothing happened, and everything was fine. But people, I guess, were so mad. And it's funny how people are so much in other people's business, but they really don't give a fuck. And I mean that like, and I'm not going to say every single person that's against abortion, but abortion to me is an example of like all these people trying to tell women, don't have an abortion. And, if that's your opinion and you don't believe in it for yourself, that's fine. And like they really give, especially the people like running for Congress, the guys, like they really give a fuck, really. They really care if a woman has an abortion. It's a bunch of bullshit. They don't give a fuck. They could care less, and they're not gonna. I don't see them taking them in. Actually, Michelle Bachmann, who I think is in that case, but she did actually adopt a lot of kids. So, I guess I'll give her some credit regarding that. But all this woman did was let her son ride on the subway. Everybody judged her for it. And then I guess it helped her, though, because she ended up writing a book. And as I said, she was a journalist. But at the time, I believe she had been fired. And now she's a big spokesperson for, and actually I can get her name from my other thing. I apologize for that. She's basically she's kind of the face of free range parenting or free range kids, essentially, from her, just from that. And you would think something like that is just like whatever, you know, who gives a fuck? So her son went on a fucking, shit, is it not on here neither? Lenore Skenazy, that's her name, I'm sorry. So Lenore Skenazy, who is actually pretty entertaining. If you go to YouTube, you can find her videos where she goes through the whole talk of what happened, and she's very, we'll say, animated in her talk, and she does a great job. She's entertaining. I'll play a clip that she's in, but I guess just from that she was, and maybe she just isn't anymore because of because it was a few years ago. So, oh, there's a picture of her where she actually looks good. And most of her her videos, she has glasses and her hair's all messed up. So she got like one of those shots that like it looks like, you know, I remember they used to have these things, glamour shots, you know, they did you all up in your makeup and whatever. But yes, it was 9 years old. So she wrote it in a column in the New York Sun because she got fired from the New York Daily News, and then she was freelancing. So after that hit, that's when, you know, she was called like the worst parent in the world and all of this shit. But really, it actually helped her because now a lot of people know who she is. She's the face of the free range, you know, parents kind of movement, I guess. I guess it's a movement. And she wrote a couple books. So, but she is very entertaining. I liked her talk on YouTube where she gives speeches, and pretty much almost everyone was the same was the same one. So I was looking for more, but because she's really the only one I could find. I mean, there's other people, but she was the main person when you look for free range kids that you find. But she has a website, freerangekids.com, and she has articles and about what's going on with different things and with free range kids, and she has crime stats and laws and other resources as well. So, and where you can book her, you know, to speak and the press, and I guess she had a TV show too. Yeah, I thought she had a reality show. I guess World's Worst Mom. It was on. Was it on Discovery? It said starting January 22nd. So I don't know that meant that it just started this year or that she hasn't updated. But yeah, according to this, World's Worst Mom is on Discovery Life Wednesday mornings at 10 o'clock. So because the part that I don't really know is what is the rest of her philosophy when it comes to parenting? Because from what I saw about free range kids, it's just essentially, okay, you let your kids go out and play. It's really fucking stupid because years ago, I remember going out and riding my bike when I was, I'm trying to remember when I got my bike, like 7 or 8. at least. And my brother would probably around the same time, or maybe I was a little older, but he was 3 years younger than me, and he was out too. And it wasn't a big deal. We would walk around. We lived in an apartment complex. We'd walk around. We'd ride our bikes. We'd sometimes walk out of the apartment complex, up the street. There was a mall about 25 minutes away. Sometimes we'd walk to. There was this other store that we would sometimes walk to. It's almost like a thrift store. I remember Building 19. I wonder if that was just a Massachusetts thing. Actually, it was Building 19 and 3/4, but we called it Building 19. But I wonder if that was just a Massachusetts thing, or they have Building 19s in other states. But really what it is it's just letting your kids fucking go outside and play by themselves. That's it. It's nothing complicated or nothing that seems like a big deal at all. And here we'll go to what she describes free range kids. She talks about her story, and that's really it. And she started her website and everything, but it doesn't, it just seems like, from what I'm getting out of this, and I don't know if she came up with the helicopter parent too, because it's like so it's like there's a little war going on between the helicopter parents and the free range kids. So the helicopter parents are, well, we'll get to that, but they're the opposite of the free range kid parent or free range parents. But what she also had talked about, which is the truth, that crime stats are lower than what they were when she was a kid, or even when I was a kid. And I know that for a fact because I've looked at them as well. And things are less dangerous, yet parents are a lot more scared. They think that their kids can't be out alone. And what they're doing to the kids I think they're doing a lot of things. And I think, and she had said this as well, that a lot of this obviously comes from the media, because you have all these things, all the bad things that happen, of course, are, shown on the media. And basically, I call it government media because it's controlled by the government. I mean, currently, I believe you have 6 or 7 major media companies that make up, 95%, that own 95% of all of media. I remember in college, there was a book where there was like 10, and it went into, because nobody was talking about it, because they, why would the media talk about how it was all owned by these companies? And so somebody had written a book, and in this book, that's what they wrote about, how nobody wanted anybody to know, and how the companies, that there were only, I think, 10 or 12 at that point. But since then, they kept merging, CVS, Viacom, I remember, was one of them since then, because this was like 2000. So since then, more and more companies have merged. But what people didn't realize, when they said media, they would think, TV and movies and but it's way more than that. It's TV, movies, newspaper, publishing companies, internet search engines, any type of media that you can think of, they buy up. So they control the flow of information. So essentially, all you see on the news is the bad things that happen. So if something happens 1 in 10 million times, you're not going to hear about the 10 million times that the kid walked down the street and nothing happened. No, you're going to hear about the one time something did. And you can't live your life like that anyway, because anything can happen at any time. Cars are more dangerous. You have a higher chance of getting killed in a car accident anyway than being kidnapped or whatever parents are afraid of when they let their kids go out. And if they're that afraid, give them fucking pepper spray, man. I don't get this whole fucking shit where, with weapons, how the government wants to ban all these weapons, and at the same time, not that they want to ban pepper spray, but in some states you have to have a permit. That they want to ban like guns, but things are so dangerous, right? So, and what about just, and some people will take this as derogatory to women, but what about women in general that are, weigh 100 pounds and are skinny and can't defend themselves? Not to say that every woman that's skinny can't defend themselves. I'm not saying that. But, I mean, how much more of a chance does a 100-pound woman have than a 10-year-old kid of defending themselves against getting kidnapped? So, and I think every woman should have a fucking gun. I think everybody should have a gun, really, but for protection. But definitely women, especially skinny, or I don't know how to say this word, it doesn't come off badly, but women that have a higher chance of being kidnapped or raped or something, probably attractive women should carry guns more than. I'm just going to shut up while I'm ahead. Anyway, but something could happen to anybody. So there's plenty of people that can't defend themselves neither. So you can't live your life that way where, because we're scared, we're not going to let our kids go outside and play. We're not going to let them leave the house without us. Or it's crazy. And it's not based on any sense of reality. It's just based on a made up sense of reality. And that's, to me, what the government does, is that they create this narrative or whatever reality they want through government media, through politicians, through all of this shit. And then they scare the fuck out of people. If a kid gets kidnapped, it's all over the news. You get Amber Alerts to your phone. And at least those you can turn off, because it doesn't even say what it is. I remember my fiance got one and it just said like a car and a license plate. It didn't say anything about any specifics. The other thing you have on your phones, if you don't know it, is you actually have an Obama, like, I think it even says, well, it might say president. I don't know if it says. I'm thinking it says Obama. I don't know. I took a picture and I posted it on Facebook. But it's like presidential. It might say presidential updates. And you can't fucking turn that off. That means at any time, and we pretty much know this anyway, that the government can take control of your phone, but they can take control of everybody's phones at the same time to send out a fucking message to say whatever they want. And that's pretty fucked up. But anyway, back to free range kids. I mean, people believe this bullshit in the media, and they let it scare them, and their kids are, one, they grow up the same way. They grow up in a world where they're scared. Maybe they're able to break out of that, or they think their parents are crazy, that they're being way too overprotective, and that can happen as well. But it's definitely not good for the kid. It's not good for independence, for a kid to become more independent. It's not good in a lot of ways to be able to get out, get away from your parents if you want to, and just go outside and hang out with some friends or go to the park and just, it's good to get outside and get exercise. And they're essentially promoting this whole idea of what society in general doesn't want people to do, and that's sit in the house and fucking watch TV and play video games and be on the internet all the time. So it's totally contradicting what they want to stay away from. So I don't know. So on the other side of that, you have helicopter parents. So before we get to helicopter parents, I'm going to take a quick break. If you'd like to call in, if you have any comments or questions or whatever, you can call in at 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can Skype into the show. Username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request with your name and what you want to talk about. And to expedite the process, if you're calling in, if you can, just send a text with the same thing, your name and what you want to talk about. So we will be back right after this. Be sure to check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, and we'll be back after this.
Gregory Adams is 11, his sister Aries is 8, and so some people freak out when they see this. What on earth are their parents thinking, they ask? Letting kids wander alone, crossing streets by themselves, deep in the dense and dangerous jungle we know and fear as Brooklyn.
We really wanted our kids to be independent.
Alina Adams says it's a good thing to let her children learn early to take responsibility for themselves.
The only way that you can make a person independent is if you allow them the opportunity to make their own choices and, most importantly, to make their own mistakes. Because how is anyone ever going to develop good judgment if no one has ever given them the opportunity to make a decision?
For instance,
I was playing on the scaffolding once. I did forward roll and I fell on my face, and now I know next time not to play on the scaffolding because I'll fall on my face.
Do you think you learn more from making mistakes than you do from getting everything right?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Alina sees herself as the antidote to the overprotective helicopter parent. She's a free-range parent.
I was a free-range parent before I knew I was a free-range parent.
Some might condemn Alina as the world's worst mom, but that would be unfair. This is the world's worst mom. Lenore Skenazy, writer, TV host, and mom of 2 boys.
World's worst, yep.
She also invented and owns the trademark for the term free-range kids, about which she's doing a radio interview at the moment.
Free-range kids is the movement I started, and you'll recognize them because they're just plain old kids raised the old-fashioned way.
This all started when Lenore let her son Izzy ride the subway all by himself.
I wasn't scared, but I was excited. Kind of like a jittery excited that I can't believe I'm finally doing this.
Okay, wait, you're thinking this isn't such a big deal. But here's what Izzy looked like when he first took that subway ride by himself. He was 9. It was all his idea. His mom just set it up. She left him at Bloomingdale's with a subway map, a fare card, and $20. He rode from Midtown Manhattan to Queens on the subway and then transferred to a bus home. And a few days later, his mom wrote a column about it.
The reaction was that I got labeled America's Worst Mom. If you Google America's Worst Mom, I'm there for 77 Google Pages. I mean, I just looked it up the other day. It's like 3 million hits.
The idea of abduction is a very rare event.
So I was on all these shows instantly and being grilled, you know, why would you do this? And don't you care? And how would you have felt if you died? Like, horrible questions.
You could have gotten the same experience in a safer manner. Right, well, let me ask you about that.
But what is the same experience is going on the subway, and that is safe. It's safe to go on the subway. It's safe to be a kid. It's actually safe to ride your bike on the streets. We're, like, brainwashed because of all the stories we hear that it isn't safe, but those are the exceptions. That's why they make it to the news. This is like boy boils egg.
The emails started coming in, but the people who thought Lenore was the world's worst mom were outnumbered by those who thought she'd hit the nail on the head in a world scared witless by day-to-day living. Statistics show crime is lower now than when today's parents were kids, and cities, especially, are safer.
So I started my blog, the Free Range Kids blog, that very weekend, to say my side of the story, which is that I love my children. I love safety. I love helmets, car seats, seat belts, mouth guards. Invite me to a baby shower, and the gift I inevitably bring is a fire extinguisher, right? So I'm not anti-safety. I just don't believe that our kids need a security detail when they leave the house. And that's where I realized I was slightly out of step with the rest of my country and yours.
Maybe not so out of step. Skenazy has parlayed her parenting philosophy into a reality TV show, and her idea of free-range parenting is taking root in other countries. The Land is a documentary about a playground in northern Wales that looks like this. Kids are encouraged to make their own fun in what really is a junkyard. And they do, even literally playing with fire. It's been going for about a year and no one's been hurt.
Moving.
But there's angst out there and it can get ugly. Devora Mativ is 6. Her parents give her and her older brother a lot of freedom. They sometimes walk from a park that's about 1.5 kilometers away to their home in Silver Spring, Maryland. Once, a neighbor who saw them walking alone called police.
Okay, how old do they look?
Maybe 7. Little boy, maybe about 7, 8. Little girl, maybe about 6.
Okay, and you don't see any parents around them?
No, ma'am.
For the Mativ family, that was the start of months of trouble with the police and with Maryland's Child Protective Services, CPS.
The people who came the first time, they spoke very plainly. They said, what you're doing is against our policy.
CPS said that?
Yeah.
And what did you say?
Well, we looked into the law, and we did not see a connection, so we said, well, we're going to test your policy.
Right. Or we're not, I mean, not so much test, but we don't see a reason to change our parenting style based on some arbitrary decision from CPS.
A few months later, when police saw the kids walking home alone together again, they picked them up. But they didn't take them home. They didn't take them to the police station. They just held them.
This is, in fact, where the kids sat for 2.5 hours in the back of a police car.
A police car.
Right, nobody called us. Nobody walked the 2.5 blocks to tell us where the kids were.
Eventually, police took the kids to Child Protective Services, where they were held until about 10 o'clock that night. The Mativs didn't get their kids back until they signed a statement saying the children would not be left alone when off their own property. All of that has since been dropped, and the Mativs are suing CPS. Lenore Skenazy's view is that if people want something to worry about, they should worry about how much more intrusive government and policing agencies are becoming in the lives of parents. Skenazy says she likes to pose this question to parents. Think of something you did as a kid that you loved doing, that you don't let your own kids do, and then think about why that is. Keith Bogue, CBC News, New York.
If you Google America's Worst Mom, I'm there for 68 Google pages.
Hey, it's Kennedy for Reason TV at Bleecker Street Park here in New York City with Lenore Skenazy. Now, Lenore, you've become famous for writing columns not only in the New York Post, you also had a book that came out in 2009, Free Range Kids.
Free Range Kids is the book, the blog, the movement. Yep.
And it is a movement. When I talk to people about that, they're really inspired at the thought of, really, I can stop worrying and be a better parent?
I don't know if you'll be a better parent, but you don't have to worry to be a good parent.
Yeah. And Parenting nowadays is filled with worry. It is all about restriction and regulation and hysteria. When did you first realize this?
I realized it before I became the free-range mom. I remember a friend telling me that she had been at the at Walmart or someplace like that and waiting in line, and the lady in line behind her asked her if she would watch the baby. And my friend Melissa said yes, and then she told me, wasn't that crazy? I mean, I could have just stolen her baby. Nobody should ever leave a child unattended. So she felt that the woman behind her was crazy to trust her. Yeah. And that's when I started thinking, really, are we not supposed to trust our children with anybody at any time? And that, in fact, is the mantra. Now you'll find parents being arrested for letting their kids play in the park. Really, I get these calls all the time. Letting their kids play in the front yard. The cops come, CPS comes, and they say, why are these children unattended? And they write up the parents for negligence. Sometimes the parents have to go to court.
So do you think when we grew up, we were obviously less restricted? I mean, our moms would say, okay, go out and play, be back by dinner. Why don't people do that anymore?
People don't do that anymore because when my parents were raising me, they could not reel off the names Elizabeth Smart and J.C. Dugard and Amber from the Amber Alerts because the stories hadn't become sensationalized. Local news was still local. And so because the media loves those stories because they get the biggest ratings, those are the ones that inhabit our brains and we start being afraid. Once we're afraid, then everything tumbles from there. Then you start getting neighbors who are afraid because you think your kid is safe in the front yard, but they see your kid playing and they think, that mother doesn't care. Doesn't she realize? I had a woman write to my site who said that she was on the lawn.
And that's exactly what the government wants, is they want people to live in fear, to feel like they need the government. They can't go outside without being afraid that neighbors, if they see kids, they need to call the government, the police, and have them investigate what's going on. So they've also got people more into their see something, say something, which they've been trying to do for a long time anyway. Not to say that they've been trying to do it and it hasn't been successful. I'm sure people have been calling since they started the fucking ridiculous thing. The government needs to stay out. Of course, I believe that government shouldn't even exist. But even if you believe government should exist, they need to stay out of the way people parent their kids. Even if there are things going on that are actually legitimately bad. There's a guy, Carlos Morales, who used to work for the CPS and said how fucked up they were and all the bad things they did and how they got bonuses based on how many kids they took away and all of this stuff. But even if you have something legitimately wrong that they do, if a father is raping his daughter or something like that, there's still the CPS. One, I don't know how they find out about that anyway, but I still believe we're better off with the CPS because of the percentages of where there's actually something that they should get involved in are so small that they do way more damage than good. And if anybody else found out, I think that's where relatives, friends, communities would get involved and say something like that. If anybody else found out, that's where relatives and family or friends could take care of it in other ways and get the person out of there, as opposed to letting the government get involved, trying to have the government place somebody somewhere and just all of this shit. If somebody wants to go to them, that's one thing, but I don't think they should exist in the first place. I mean, there should be somewhere for people to go, but if there was no CPS, there would be private nonprofit organizations where people could go and kids could go to get help. and they'd work a lot better than what's out there now. People forget that just because something is currently run by the government, that means it has to be run by the government or it is better in the hands of the government. Usually that is not the case. So we'll go back to this clip.
With her kids, but she was reading a book, and a lady came by and said, "Put down that book. Don't you realize your children could be snatched at any minute?" Okay, that's the kind of neighbor that then calls the cops or CPS. So if you're living in a society like that where everybody is turning into the KGB in terms of your parenting, it's very hard to trust yourself, trust your kids, and trust your community. But I'm saying we have to.
Do you get a lot of backlash? Do people say you're a bad parent because of free-range kids, because of this, really traditional style of parenting?
Right, I feel like I am a really traditional parent. And yes, I mean, if you Google America's Worst Mom, I'm there for 68 Google pages. So yes, I've gotten some backlash because people really believe the worst case scenario. There's something I call worst first thinking, which is coming up with the worst possible thing that could possibly happen and proceeding as if it's likely to happen. You have to admit that there is a little risk in everything, and there has never been a safer time for children on this planet than now. And that's not just me who says that. That's Steven Pinker at Harvard says we are in the safest times ever in the history of the world.
My daughter's pediatrician had really good advice. She said, a good adult will never ask you for help. They'll never ask you to find a puppy. They'll never ask you to look for something or go off with them.
That's excellent advice. It's going off that's the problem. Never get in a car, never go off. It's so simple. And also it makes a lot more sense to kids because when you tell kids don't talk to strangers and then you go into your store and you say, I'd like a coffee, what do you do? You're talking to a stranger, and then if you're a polite, nice person, you say, excuse me. When you bump into somebody, maybe you ask for directions. So yes, you can talk to strangers. It's as simple as that.
Lenore Skenazy, go to freerangekids.com, read everything she's got, come out enlightened and liberated. For Reason TV, I'm Kennedy. Thank you, Lenore.
Oh, thanks so much.
Promoting the ideas of true freedom and liberty, nonpartisan liberty for all radio with Dave Bourne.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. And that is Katie, our official voiceover girl, who will be joining us on Thursday. She will be guest co-hosting to talk about her childhood and how she was parented, along with me talking about mine and her thoughts on future kids. And for those who don't know, she's also my fiance. So that would be, I guess, us talking about our future kids and how we, I guess, think about how we would want to parent them. And we do have a lot of differences when it comes to that. But 702-470-7664 is a number if you'd like to call in. Lenore Skenazy, I think I'm pronouncing her name right, who is the free-range parenting lady. I don't know if I'd look at that fully as a parenting philosophy or a form of parenting, just because, and she did write a book. So if I read her book, there may be more to it than that. She does seem like she supports freedom in the other things that she says, or at least freedom for her kids to do the things they want to do. If they want to go out and do something with their friends, or stay out late, or go to a party, I'm sure she's fine with all of those things. But that doesn't really say a lot about what else goes on inside her house and how she parented her kids growing up, whether it was she was more about discipline as well, which she doesn't seem like she would be, or how free she raised her kids outside of, hey, you can go out and play or you can go out and do this. That's a part of it, definitely. And I would definitely say that leans towards freedom, a philosophy that has elements of freedom in it, but it's only like it seems like it's only part of it, where I don't know enough about what else does she believe in as far as her parenting goes. Now, helicopter moms, I know a lot more about them, unfortunately. So you have these, they call them either tiger moms or helicopter parents or helicopter moms. And some of them are really nutty, and I'll play some clips from them as well. But they are, and of course, in the clips is the extreme. And the same way where you have the media, whether it's radical unschooling, peaceful parenting, free range kids, where they're all negative towards it. It's usually, now the last clip I played was from Reason, and Reason I think is a little bit more of a libertarian site and magazine, but they are more they attack sorry, I'm being distracted. I can actually hear people outside and it sounds like they better not be in my fucking yard. So I'm like trying to listen, like, are they in my yard? But they are negative when they talk about these things. Like even there's a clip with George Stephanopoulos, whatever his name is, however you pronounce it, where he insults radical unschooling, where they're just showing how ignorant they are, really, because these are things that just because they don't know anything about and they were brought up a certain way, to me, it's showing that you can't really, you're stuck in one paradigm and you can't get out of that, and anything that's not in that paradigm is bad, is wrong, so it's more that you've been brainwashed into a certain way of thinking, and that anything outside of that is just wrong. So now, whether it was scripted or not, I don't know. But I assume that was his opinion, that he, radical unschooling, that's crazy. And that's usually the reaction that people get to that. And we'll get to more into radical unschooling tomorrow. And like I said, we've talked about it with Dana Martin, who's an advocate for kids' rights, radical unschooling. And I think she's written a couple books, and she's been on Dr. Phil and Wife Swap, and she has a channel, the Sparkling Martins, on YouTube. And she's one of the more well-known radical unschoolers. And her oldest now, I think, must be 17. And they've been unschooled their whole life and basically brought up in a way where they were free to do what they wanted to do. So right away, because of being brought up a certain way or living in a society, what happens is people get stuck in these, I guess, whatever's considered societal norms. The problem is that societal norms constantly change. Something that was considered normal 20 years ago might not be now, or something that wasn't considered socially acceptable. I mean, there's tons of things that you could go through that weren't considered socially acceptable years ago, but are now, whether it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago. So things obviously change, but to confine yourself and to confine your thinking within the constraints of society, and just because, well, societal norms are this, so I'm stuck in this box in my thinking, is crazy. Now, I'm not saying that you have to then agree with it, but to just right away insult or down something, to me, makes you the ignorant one, because you're the one who's not even getting information or looking at something objectively. One, you're looking at something from your own paradigm, and you're judging something without knowing anything about it. But so these helicopter moms, which I am judging from knowing about them, are defined as controlling, being involved in all aspects of their kids' lives. And this goes all the way, I was saying before I kind of went into my little rant there, that there was one video, and I mean, this is just one video. This does not mean that there's a huge percentage of parents that are like this, but where the kids were in college and the mom's calling them like right before class, right after class. What are they doing? Where are they going? She wants she already had it, their schedule to all of their classes, to know where they are at all times. And it's insane. And especially being in college, I know that the parents are probably paying for it, and that's where they are able to keep control, because they're like, okay, well, if I tell my parents to fuck off, they're not going to pay for my college. I would rather just get the loans and tell them to fuck off if they didn't stay out of my life. And I don't mean totally stay out of my life, but know their boundaries. Now, I don't know. I mean, this was just a small clip. I don't know if these kids have talked to their parents or what. And I don't know the rationale behind the moms, because it's more moms than dads usually, especially with boys. These were guys. But I think even with girls, although fathers can be overprotective, I think that they're not going to go through, and this is a generalization, but go through all the hassle of putting together their kid's schedule and where they are every minute and all of that. But I'm sure there are some that do that. So this kind of came from another woman who her parents were born in China, but she was born here. Once again, I took her name off the thing, and she actually married an American, which is kind of funny, and I guess they differ on some stuff. But she had written a book, and the same way Mrs. Skinazi is the I guess the free range parent person, she is the helicopter mom. I don't know if I wrote her name down. No, I just called her Tiger Mom. But I can find it. But she, and I have her name in the clip. So she basically forced, for the most part, the way it was described with her. So you had a couple different, I watched a couple different examples and videos where you had the mom that was actually following everything her kids did all day while in college and calling them and checking up on them and all of that. And then you had this other lady who said, you know, she raised them the quote unquote like Chinese way or whatnot, where she kind of forced them into everything, into one I think had played violin, and you know, pushed them into doing this and that, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And then she had an issue with one of her daughters, and then she kind of backed off. Let me play this clip because this story is actually, it's kind of interesting, I guess. I believe I still have this. Well, I have the interview with John Stossel. So this is the Tiger Mom in her interview with John Stossel. And she comes off a lot more normal. And, of course, the video with the woman who was calling her kids all the time in college and involved in every little aspect and controlling and everything, she, you know, they showed what they wanted to show, and probably wanted to show her as a crazy lunatic mom. But this woman who wrote a book, she talks about, well, one of her daughters kind of tried to rebel. So from that, she did kind of take a step back and say that the most important thing was her relationship with her daughter. But at the same time, she pushed everything on her kids and said it like she had everything mapped out. You have to do this and you have to do that, and I'm going to make sure you do all your homework and you get all A's and you spend all this time studying. And that can be very dangerous as well, because what happens is, and this is a generalization, but a lot of times kids lose out on their childhood and then they go to college and get some type of freedom and start doing drugs and engage in different, you know, behavior, like maybe they have sex with a whole bunch of guys or whatever, because they never got that childhood. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having some kind of a balance, but I believe that it's up to, and I'll get, of course, more into this later in the week, but, and I've talked about it before, that it's up to the kid, that the kid is a human being. They are a person that owns themselves. And these helicopter parents, they don't, I mean, really the whole opposite part, I guess, of the free range kids is they don't let their kids go out by themselves. They are always hovering, and that's where the helicopter comes from. So they won't let their kids walk to the park by themselves or do any of those things by themselves, at least not at a young age. You know, at what age, I don't know. Maybe when they're 16, 17, or it depends. Maybe when they're a teenager at 13, 14, they can, you know, walk down the street by themselves, but they're very controlled. The woman in college, I mean, she was checking their emails, their personal and their college accounts. their social media, their homework, and this is kids in college. So really, once you get to the point where, and I know it's a hard situation because, as I said, they're probably paying for it, but I mean, you get to a point where you got to put it on the kids, where they have to stand up for themselves. Now, unfortunately, until you're 18, there's not a lot you can do, and that's the government. You know, it's like, what's the difference between being 17 and 18 or even 16 and 18? The government has picked an arbitrary age of, well, your parents control you until you hit this age. And not only that, as I said at the beginning, I mean, it goes beyond that. You have your parents, you have all these laws, you have the schools, and now you have police in the schools. For kids, I mean, it was hard when I was a kid, and it wasn't that long ago, but things have changed a lot in not a lot of time. And I saw it at the time. I was like, you know, if I was born any later, I felt like that things were getting worse. I saw things getting worse for kids and more control and more rules and all of those things. I kind of saw them, you know, behind me, and I was like, at the time, finally happy that I was born when I was, because it was, if I was born any later, I think things started to get, maybe not right away, but maybe, you know, 5 years after I graduated, 6 years, things started to get more and more stricter in so many ways. And you look at things now with metal detectors and police and all of these things, Common Core, the databases, the tracking, all of these things where kids, I mean, the level of rights that kids have is, it's like they're barely even people. And just because of their age. Now, I mean, I understand, you know, kids, like little kids. But when you're talking about, you know, 12, 13 and older, they really are treated unfairly, and it must be very frustrating for kids that age. I guess it would depend on the parents, because the parents can either make it worse or help to make it better, but the parents can only do so much as well, because, you know, if you're going to government school, especially now, parents can take you out of government school, and that's positive, but it really is unfair, because I think what happens is people forget what it's like, or once they get older, they don't care anymore. They don't really care about the rights of kids anymore when they get older. And if you look at things, you want to talk about discrimination, really, kids are up there when it comes to, I don't know what you would call them, a class of, you know, because they're all going to obviously get older and grow out of it. So I don't know what you'd call them, but people tend not to care because they cared when they were that age, but then once they got older, they didn't care anymore. I think that, and I'll talk about this on Thursday when I get more into, I guess, my past with, you know, parenting and how I was parented, I guess, that I will never forget, how I guess I felt, and how I felt like at times in jail or stuck in a situation that you can't do anything about, that you have no power and no control, and it's frustrating. And, I believe if at 15, if you can go out and get a job and support yourself, you should be able to. Just because the government wants to set up an arbitrary age, you can't. And that even adds to, most girl teenage runaways end up becoming, prostitutes because they can't get fucking jobs full time, and they can't legally get an apartment. So people leave so many things out when they look at, well, this is a result of this or this is a result of that. And they leave out so many things, like saying that, in the case of teenage prostitution, and nobody would ever think of the fact that part of it may be because teenagers can't move out of their house on their own. They can't get a legal job where they work full time, and they can't do any of those things unless they go to court and somehow get emancipated, which costs money as well. So nobody would ever think of that, though, when they think of something like teenage prostitution being a problem. No one would think of that, anything to do with that, as any solution or anything that has to do with the cause. And I'm not saying that that's why there's teenage prostitution. I'm just saying that things like that would be totally left out, not even thought of, because people think in a certain paradigm that really revolves around the government, because that whole thing has to do with the government's arbitrary age of 18 and the laws they put in place until you're 18. So, sorry, I was about to play this clip from John Stossel with the Chinese tiger mom. And she's the one who brought that up, that she was Chinese, and that she kind of makes a statement about ethnic groups. First, she kind of says, well, Chinese people kind of do this, but she's like, ethnic people in general. Well, I'll let you listen and you can decide. So we'll be right back after this. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com.
She forced them to practice violin and piano for hours.
Kids have to practice 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day. And I think for a lot of normal American parents, that's inconceivable.
Her kids excel. Here they are at ages 11 and 14, performing at a grown-up concert. One daughter also excelled in tennis, and at school, the other made valedictorian. But the Tiger Mom's book got lots of criticism. She doesn't let kids make their own decisions. A manual for parents who want to systematically weed out any genuine interest or passion for life.
The dream is you just give the child a clarinet and amazing jazz pops out. Or you give the child a piece of paper and, string theory will come out. But before you can invent string theory or invent the theory of relativity, you need to be able to multiply really well.
Like, where's childhood?
Yes, we want our children to be happy, but it's not the secret to happiness to say, do whatever you want, just enjoy yourself.
You called your daughter garbage once.
And I mentioned this at a dinner party, and several people walked out.
Yeah, I would think so.
And Amy Chua is her name. So if you want to get the book from the library or buy it, I don't know, they won't want to buy it, but to hear her story and probably how fucked up it is, it's Amy Chua. It's CHUA. So, and I'm sure she has a website as well.
Just destroying your child's spirit.
To me, the message is, you know what? I think you're better than that. I think you should hold yourself to a higher standard. And honestly, I think, parents these days, they're so terrified of making their children feel bad.
Yes, maybe for good reason. Everyone knows Asians are more likely to commit suicide. Except what everyone knows is wrong.
Asian Americans actually have among the lowest suicide rates of any group.
It's true. The Asian suicide rate is half that of the general population. Maybe tiger moms are better at instilling self-esteem.
You can tell your child, you're amazing all you want, but that doesn't instill true confidence. True self-esteem has to be earned.
Amy says Asian parents are more likely to be tiger moms, and that's why Asian Americans get better grades and have higher average incomes. Now, in her new book, The Triple Package, Amy and her husband argue any parent can do it, but certain immigrant groups, Jews, Cubans, Nigerians, and others, are more likely to instill values in kids that lead to success. Tiger Mom is back with a despicable new theory about racial superiority.
It is racism.
It seems to be racially charged.
She is the worst person ever born.
It's not race and genetic. We say the opposite. We say, look, if you look at America, the most successful groups include all races.
So please welcome Kudiratu Kudi Usman.
Nigerian Americans are an amazing example. Less than 1% of America's black population. They made up a quarter of Harvard Business School's black students. It's something about culture and how they're raised and expectations.
You know the secret of success. It's three things.
The first is a sense of exceptionality. We call it a superiority complex. The second element, which is a dash of insecurity. I'm not quite good enough yet. I shouldn't just sit back.
It's contradictory. Superiority complex, insecurity.
Steve Jobs is a perfect example. He had such a superiority complex, but all of his friends also described him as deeply insecure. I think that's what creates this kind of chip on the shoulder, this goading feeling like, I need to show everybody. I need to prove myself. The third element of the triple package is impulse control.
Can your child sit still and concentrate on things that won't bring rewards for years?
Chinese immigrant parents force their preschool children to do 1 hour a day, on average, of a focused activity. That could be reading, drawing, but doing something with no distractions. 1 hour on average a day compared to just 6 minutes a day for Americans on average.
But does this obedient sitting and drilling kill the creativity that leads to real innovation? Those American tech entrepreneurs who have invented so many cool things. I hear many are college dropouts, not studious kids raised by tiger moms. I look at all the innovation we've seen in America, Facebook and Google. These are not kids who were drilled. These are not kids raised by tiger moms. You're programming the kids.
You know, actually, if you look at Silicon Valley, a hugely disproportionate percentage of the innovators and startup founders are actually immigrants and immigrants' children and triple package groups.
Sergey Brin co-founded Google, Steve Chen, YouTube, Jerry Yang, Yahoo.
It's the parents' job to give them the tools, to give your children the ability to focus on something so that when they can find their passion, they can do something with it.
You had nasty fights with the girls.
Incredibly nasty, especially with my younger daughter. She refused to do it and she was snuff, and I said, get back to the piano. And at one point my husband said, you know what, maybe she just can't do it. And I said, you know what, you just don't believe in her. I'm going to do this. We drilled, and it wasn't that pleasant. But then suddenly, after like an hour and a half, her two hands came together. She realized it at the same time that I did. And after that, Lulu refused to leave the piano. And years afterward, she told me, Mommy, I remember that moment. And I think that's a life lesson that lasts forever. I think that's how you instill real confidence.
Your daughters like you?
I think they love me.
They now say, thanks, Mom, I'm glad you did this stuff?
Actually, you'd be surprised.
Would we? We'll find out when we return.
If you push your kids, won't they hate you? I bet the Tiger Mom's children won't Tiger Mom their kids.
I'll totally Tiger Mom my kids.
Her younger sister was a little less enthusiastic.
It definitely had its ups and downs. I remember being pulled out of school to practice hours a day, and of course, I'm, a 12-year-old kid. I'm gonna say, why do I have to do this? But looking back on it, I couldn't be happier.
She just began her freshman year at, where else? Harvard. Her older sister goes here too.
Oh, I totally love being raised by my mom. She's awesome.
Now, Sophia plans to join the military.
7, 8.
She already meets the Army's basic standards, but she wants to get the top score, so she works out often.
As a girl, it's important not just to meet the standard, but to kind of exceed it. 7, 8.
Kids raised by regular parents, she says, don't have the drive.
Going to college was just seeing how many, amazing, brilliant people would encounter an obstacle and just be like, I can't do this. And I can't do this is genuinely a feeling that I have never had. I have what it takes to do, absolutely anything.
Most of us hope our kids have that feeling. Some of it just exists in human nature if we adults don't crush it. As these commercials suggest, babies want to test themselves. Even if they fall, they try and try again. Many parents want to protect them from falling, but protection has a downside.
When you create an environment free of risk, what you're doing is leaving a child vulnerable.
Because being able to fall and recover is useful in life.
I work with young people today, and when they hit conflict, they have a meltdown. And I'm being
because
literal.
they've been protected as babies?
Yes. If you fire someone who's 22 today, it was not unusual for her or him to trash the place screaming and then have their parents call. They've been pampered their whole lives. And the sad reality of...
Let me just go back to that for a minute, and I'll comment more on this when we come back. But that whole... I've talked about this with millennials, and I hate that fucking word, but that's what they call them. But that he just said it's not unusual for somebody 22 to get fired, trash the place, and then have their parents call. And that's crazy. Where does that come from? And I don't think that would have anything to do with being raised the way the Tiger Mom raised their kids, that by raising them that way, they wouldn't do it. I would think, if anything, they would do it. The trash the place part, not to have the moms call, but kind of I think what they were referring to was the spoiling of kids, where they're getting everything they want and they feel entitled and they have a sense of entitlement. So when they got fired, they felt like they could just flip out and trash the place and then call their parents, call my job and tell them whatever, or get it back for me, or so. There's a big difference between being spoiled and being pampered and being treated how Tiger Mom treated her kids and pushed everything down their throats. Now, they can say now, and they're still pretty young, that, oh, yeah, it was great, but you don't know what goes on in their personal lives and what they missed out on, or what they're going to end up doing in the future if they're going to feel that they missed out on something. And maybe they won't, but it's the not having a choice, and that being the problem. And I'll go back to the clip.
The world is, you get slapped in the face all the time. You got to get tough.
Not too tough, but enough freedom to let them learn on their own helps them grow up. That's our show. Thanks for watching.
Nonpartisan liberty for all. Call in at 470-7664 or Skype in. Username, Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com. Check us out there, and definitely check out our over 280 something archives at Spreaker.com, and then just search Nonpartisan Liberty for All, or go to NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com, and the link to Spreaker will be right there. You'll be able to look through our over 200 and something archives and maybe find an old show that you want to listen to. Or a lot of the shows that we've done are not necessarily based on what was going on at the time. So I've done a lot of different types of things where, yes, we covered news stories, but a lot of it was covering different types of topics. So like what we're talking about now, I could have talked about this 6 months ago or 6 months from now, and there's not going to be much difference in what we talk about, unless, something happened that would be relevant. But there was some confusion, at least in what I saw at the end of the Stossel interview, because he had even said that, about being tough, the being tough part. And I agree with that, actually, but I don't see a correlation between having the freedom to do what you want to do and forcing your kids to do something and either making you tough. So it's like they were saying that, forcing your kid to play the violin and do this and do that it, stay in, do your homework for 3-4 hours, make sure, you're going to stay here and study and do this, pick up this violin and start playing and practice for 5 hours, or play the piano for 5 hours, that is going to somehow make you tough. And I guess in a certain way, but not in the way that they're talking about. It doesn't make you that kind of tough. It makes you obedient is really what it does. And that's my whole problem with, of course, the helicopter parents, is they're pushing obedience. Now, they're not saying if a kid came to their parent and say their parent was some kind of musician or something like that, or they had something to teach, and they had said to them, hey, I will agree to do, all this, but I want you to force me to do it. So if they wanted to learn the piano and they said, look, I know I'm going to give up if I do this on my own. I need you to push me. I need you to, no matter what, make sure I do this. That's a little different than them just forcing them to, okay, you're going to do this or you're going to do that, or I'm going to make you, study for however long. And I thought I had another clip on Tiger Mom, and I know there was one out there, but maybe I didn't download it. And it got into some other things that I kind of wanted to address more into the details of what she did. But in general, it's the force, Luke. No, but it's the force that I have the issue with. It's forcing your kids to do things that they might not want to do, and them not having the choice or having making the decision. And another analogy would be, say, a boxing trainer. You know, you agree you want to box, that's what you want to do, and you agree to follow all the orders of your boxing trainer. But that's, you agree to do that, even though during the time you might want to give up. It might be, you know, really tough, but you still sorry, I'm getting a text. That's where I'm really bad at multitasking. But, you know, you still agree to it in the beginning, and you make that agreement, and you want somebody to push you. And that's the difference between wanting somebody to push you and asking somebody to push you, and just being pushed because they want to kind of control you and say, okay, well, I want my kid to be successful. I want my kid to do this. I want my kid to do that. And because of that, I'm going to force, you know, this down their throat. So I'm going to actually try to find one more clip because I have to see what's going on outside my window here. But the lady's name is Amy Chua. There's actually the daughter interview, but I find the daughters hard to believe, to be honest, because and the reason why. Oh, I think this was the one that I had. So let me see if I can play this from the Today Show.
2011 was like.
I totally lost my train of thought grabbing that there. But yeah, sorry, the daughters, I doubt that the daughter, they might even be scared to come out and say my mother went too far. And she even said that she had an issue with the youngest. So it's kind of hard to, you know, and there are interviews with the daughters and other daughters as well, the Tiger daughters, that I'm sure they all say, oh, it's great, and it's great to be pushed and all of that. So I think this is the other one I heard that she went into more detail. So I'm going to play this real quick. It's only 5 minutes, and I think we're going to go a little late today. But we also have the rest of the week as well, where we're talking about this topic, not the Tiger Mom specifically, but the parenting. So it's not like I can't go into more of this tomorrow if we need to. But so I'm going to play this clip real quick and see what's going on outside my window and answer my text, and we'll be right back after this. Again, if you'd like to call in, if you have any comments, 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can Skype in. Username Nonpartisan Liberty for all one word. Just send a contact request and your name and what you want to talk about. And you can get all that information at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, the phone number, the username, and all of that. So we'll be right back after this.
One of the most controversial figures of 2011 was not a politician or a celebrity, but a mom. Amy Chua ignited a firestorm by sharing the surprising details of her strict parenting methods in the book Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. Well, now it's out in paperback. Amy, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You've been pounded with criticism in the 1 year since this book was released, in which you describe, as I just mentioned, this sort of these extreme methods of parenting, in which some people might say you actually berated your children into excelling. If you had to do it over again, would you write this same book?
I think I would. You know, the book is a memoir, and you know, I made a lot of mistakes. I have some regrets, but if I had to do it all over again, I would raise my kids the same way. In other words, I'm a proud, strict mom. I'm incredibly proud of the girls that I raised. And you know, you say extreme parenting, but it's interesting. If you think about it, this kind of tiger parenting is not that different from the traditional parenting of America's founders and pioneers. I don't think it's really about berating or the violin. I think it's about assuming strength rather than weakness in our children, and basically helping them be, you know, the best that they can be.
That said, how bad did it get? Because you said, I think so. So obviously it was very rough on you.
The first 2 months were pretty terrible. The internet is scary. You know, just there was so much stuff out there. I would say 99% by people who had not read the book. So I felt like I was trying to defend something that I hadn't written. And also the attacks on my children were the cruelest. You know, people were writing about 2 girls they had never met, saying, oh, these girls are definitely going to be mentally ill and commit suicide. But my girls were amazing. They took it better than I did.
One of them even wrote in the New York Post an essay to defend you. But, you know, I'm surprised that you are surprised that people responded so negatively, because, you know, you do in this book, while you do talk about a lot of different things, you do in this book admit to calling your kids lazy and self-indulgent and pathetic to motivate them. So why are you surprised that the public would react negatively to that kind of parenting?
I think it's weird to pick out a few little lines from the book without reading the whole thing.
Right, but you regret saying those words?
Absolutely. The book is
you do regret saying those words
to my kids. Yeah, the book actually exposes some of my own worst moments as a mom, and I think anybody who's had a teenager, they're all moments that we wish we could take back. But I don't think that's the center of the book. I mean, for me, that's not what tiger parenting is about. For me, it's about basically teaching your kids that they are capable of so much more than they think they are, and not letting them give up. And to pick out words like lazy, I want to say the flip side is I think so many American parents now, or Western parents, even myself included, we're afraid. We're afraid that if we say something, our kids will not like us. And I don't think it should be that way.
Or that they won't be happy. It's not about them not liking us. It's also about wanting them to not be emotionally damaged.
Yeah,
would you be surprised if your children would you be surprised if your children do seek counseling at some point, given the response that people have had? They're concerned about how difficult it might have been for them.
I mean, maybe, but right now my kids are, I mean, they're thriving.
You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
So I wanted to just play I believe that was the clip, just to talk about the putting down as well. And that, you know, the other thing is like Stockholm Syndrome. It's like, you know, it's still their mother. How many people are actually going to come out and put their mother down? And of course, I'm sure she said, I was doing it for you guys, and they're successful. So they can say, well, if it wasn't for my mother, I wouldn't be successful. Although that they don't know what the case would have been if their mother didn't, you know, push all these things and jam it down their throat. There are plenty of people who made it on their own without the help of their parents, without their parents pushing them. Quite the opposite. And I was one of those people as well, where I got put down like, oh, you're never going to do anything. And, you know, and I'll talk about that on Thursday. But I know that, you know, it's part of their culture as well. At least her parents came from China, and that, respecting their parents and that part of it. So I don't know that they would come out and say anything about their mother. They may say things privately. They may, maybe they don't. But that, basically what I'm saying is that's not a validation of what she did, to put them down, to force them to do what she did. And that's more what I was looking for, is more of the, how much she took away from their childhood, because I didn't really get a lot of that in the interviews. And maybe I'll even read the book, depending on how long it is, because I have a lot of books that I still want to read. But whichever way you want to look at it, whether they honestly think that it was the right thing to do, and that's at this point, they think that. Who knows what they're going to think? I think they're in their early 20s or early or mid 20s. And who knows what they're going to think, later. So my main point, I guess, is that it's not a validation to me. It doesn't say, well, maybe that's good for some people. I know that all people are different, of course, and that just because you react one way to one person, the same thing might not work on another person. But your parents are not there to motivate you or to push you into a career or to do any of that. That is not their job unless you ask them for some kind of help in that area. I don't believe that that's their job at all. And I believe in cases like this where and again, it's hard to gauge how much of their childhood they actually lost. But I would also say, again, on the other side of this, that I don't know what their political views are, and I don't know how they feel about government. But I would, if I had to bet on it, I would think that they were more supportive of the government and thought that, the same way that the government needs to force people to do things, and even though the government's doing it at the barrel of a gun or a tank or a nuclear bomb, not individuals but countries. So I bet if I had to bet on it, and I'll go back probably before tomorrow's show and listen to the interviews with the daughters. But I would have to say that if I had to bet on it, I would say that they were probably more statist than anything. And for those who are listening and don't know the word statist, if you just happen to come across the show and decided to listen to it, statist is, I don't even know how I define a statist, but as like pro-government, like they support the state. I look at them as like loving the state, really. Like they want government, they want to be controlled. I don't know the textbook definition of statist. That's kind of funny because, I have my definition of statist, but I never really read the textbook definition of statist, but that's how I would define them. Obviously somebody who supports the state, but not just supports the state, loves the state, is a complete, incomplete obedience of the state. So that's what, there's more than one thing that bothers me about these helicopter parents. It's not just the forcing them. It's not just, Stefan Molyneux, who is I'll call him the kind of face of peaceful parenting, at least that I know of. Peaceful parenting. So essentially the free range kids thing is from Lenore Skenazy, is who I think of when I think of the free range kids thing. The Tiger Moms, helicopter parents is the Amy Chua. And peaceful parenting, I think of Stefan Molyneux. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other people that advocated the same things before them, or that thought of any of these things, and they're just not, they didn't get any publicity. I mean, there's things that I have thought of that, I didn't get any publicity for or whatever, but I had the same ideas that other people had. That kind of came off in an arrogant way. I didn't mean it like that, but just like, like you think a certain way and you think about something and it happens to, then you hear, like Larkin Rose is one of those people that I agreed with the things that he said, but I had the same ideas basically before I listened to him. But that doesn't mean that I thought of them before him, or that or it doesn't mean anything really. It just means I had ideas, whatever. But I'm saying that there may have been, people that are known for these ideas out there, but those are the current people, I guess, I think of. So Stefan Molyneux with peaceful parenting, and this is where we kind of get into a more free way of raising your kids. So if I was to kind of rank them based on what I know, and I know more about peaceful parenting and radical unschooling, first, of course, would be free range kids being the least free, but that's not knowing if there's any other aspects of that, or if it's just, hey, you let your kids go outside and play. Okay, you let your kids go out. And that's the extent of it. That's just the extent of it that I know. Peaceful parenting, I know a lot more. And then, of course, radical unschooling being the most what people would call extreme. Now, I thought originally peaceful parenting was more, and we had talked about it on another show where we did a show just on peaceful parenting before, but I thought peaceful parenting was more based upon not hitting kids, not what it actually is about. And what it is about is more, at least from the definition of, this is all from Stefan Molyneux, who has a show on YouTube. I don't know if I'm assuming he's on other applications as well, that you can get his show, from other ways besides YouTube. But I just always, the shows I've seen, I see on YouTube. And some things I agree with him on, some things I don't. And there was some quote unquote controversies a while ago about him suing somebody to take down his content. I know that I did a show, and I don't know if this had anything to do with playing his clip, but at the beginning of the show, I played about a 20-minute clip from him. And that was just to whatever the subject was, and I can't remember off the top of my head right now. It had to do with the subject, and he explained it very well. So I wanted to give kind of an introduction to that subject. So I would even claim that was fair use, because it is, because fair use is something like if you're, a news reporter and you play a clip of something from, say, another news report, or something from, footage of another station got on the story, or so, even though I'm not a news reporter, but it is a somewhat political show, I guess, although I hate to kind of just label it just politics and news. I guess that's what it would be, but a lot of it is philosophical, but it's still I think a lot of the philosophical stuff has to do with things pertaining to the government, and which is not necessarily politics, but it's still government. So, but anyway, so because of that, I would say that it's fair use playing a clip of, here's his, take on, or his explanation on the subject. Although they could say that, well, you didn't come out and say, well, here's a clip from Stefan Molyneux with his take on the subject, or something like that, where I just played it as an intro before the show started. And I got a flag on YouTube, because YouTube will flag any copyrights, like anything. The thing, though, you can usually get away with, just so people know, is if you take the just the music without the audio of music, you can usually get away with that. But I play clips all the time from YouTube. I play YouTube news clips, and that's fair use to play news clips. And I consider his clips news clips. So maybe because he considers his show a philosophy show, which it is. I would call it a news / political philosophy show. I mean, he does get into other things like relationships and stuff like that. But my point being is, I don't know if it got flagged because I played his clip or there was something else in there. But anyway, I appealed it and it was fine. I didn't have a problem with it. But this is supposed to be somebody that agrees or is against, copyright and intellectual property. And from what I understand, he went and had somebody either sued them or threatened to sue them if they didn't take down his content. And they used it the same way as fair use because they were criticizing him. And I think that's why. But I don't know all the facts of what happened. There could have been more to it than that. That's what was reported. And then there was something with his wife that I had heard as well. But I don't know. Some of his stuff I like and some of it I don't. So I do listen to him, but I kind of filter through what I listen to. I don't have anything bad to say about him. I think he does a good job in what he does. But again, there's some stuff I just don't agree with him on, and there's some stuff I do agree with him on. His supporting Trump, who won New York tonight and gave the same stupid, arrogant speech that he gives every time. We're going to make things great again, and it's going to be great. Everything's great. It's great. Hey, you know what? It's great. So I don't agree with him there. Anyway, he parents kind of based on the non-aggression principle. And that's really what his definition of peaceful parenting is, to simplify it or to summarize it. I mean, there's more to it than that, but I thought it was more about just not hitting, but it's more about not punishing and not getting in the, not violating the non-aggression principle in your parenting. So not aggressing, or not, his words were, not imposing your will on your child whenever possible. But that's the whenever possible. However, when he had Dana Martin, who I had on my show as well, who, when I think of radical unschooling, to me, she's kind of the most well-known when it comes to radical unschooling, that he has differences with her. And he even said at the beginning of the interview that he, let me actually just play that real quick, just the very beginning of the interview when he says that. And hopefully they won't flag it for playing part of his show.
All right, I'm here to have, for those of you who listen to my show, I guess for the past little more than half decade, you know that I try regularly to blow other people's minds. And this is probably why you can see Dana's wearing a fine headscarf on her head. But the truth of the matter is that for one of the few times in my interviewing career, Dana is here to blow my mind. Because I consider myself a pretty open-minded guy, a person who's happy to embrace new paradigms, new thoughts, new ideas. But maybe it's the fact that I was in boarding school in England at the age of 6.
So that alone, and this is what I'm going to get into more tomorrow, because I want to talk about tomorrow, really focus on what is the key, or what is the answer to obtaining true freedom and liberty. And is peaceful parenting enough? Because there is it's a whenever possible, and that he kind of, when it comes to the other stuff, he kind of stops at a point and doesn't go as far as somebody like Dana Martin? Or is it enough? And will that in itself be enough? Will bringing a kid up that way necessarily make them an independent person that will support freedom? Will it, or will it increase the amount of people that will support freedom? Or is it something that it doesn't matter, they're going to be whoever they are, or they're going to rebel against it, or, there's a lot of things that could come up, or that can be argued when it comes to that. So let me play a little more of this, because this is a long interview, so I don't want to play the whole thing, but I want to give kind of a little introduction of what we're going to talk about tomorrow. And also, I want to at least talk about one article that's important before we leave for the night. So let me just play a few minutes of this, and we will be right back.
But this unschooling stuff, Oh, now I know how a statist feels. I find it hard. I've been watching your videos all day and reading your work, and I really want to compliment you. This is, of course, Dana. And it's hard. This is one of the biggest humps I've had intellectually. I love the idea. It fits with everything else that I believe, but it is like trying to put a star-shaped item into a square-shaped, and I mean that literally, square-shaped heart. So I wonder if you could tell me and tell the listeners a little bit about what unschooling is and why, hopefully it's more than just a challenge to me, but to others.
Yeah, well, unschooling is a twofold philosophy. One, it's educational freedom, and for two, it's living in a partnership parenting paradigm as opposed to the traditional authoritarian parenting paradigm. I think most people can come to the unschooling educational side of it a lot more easy, just with technology and just what people know about, internal motivation being the key to true learning. But, releasing certain ideas around parenting is definitely harder for people to understand, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, I was watching one of your videos where you said it's important not to condescend to children. And you sort of pointed out, if our partner clears out the garage or does something, we don't say, good job, well done, good job. And I thought that was interesting because I, of course, do catch myself doing that with my daughter. And the one thing was that, so for the afternoon, I decided not to do that good job thing. And do you know what I said to myself? I heard this literally in my head. When not saying that to my daughter, I said to myself, good job, Steph, good job. I'm not saying good job to your daughter. It's a sort of fake enthusiastic bubble voice that seems rather hard to put a stake through its heart.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the intention behind the words. Authentically, if my kids do something that I think is great, I'll tell them. But I think, culturally, it's important to realize that 99% of parenting books on the market today and parenting advice, through TV and so forth, like Super Nanny and those shows, are focused on meeting the parents' needs solely. It's really focused on controlling behavior, the focus on uninterrupted sleep, obedience, compliance. And so we're kind of trained in our culture as parents to train our kids. And so when we say, good job, we're not really authentically coming from a place of complimenting them as much as we are wanting to have our own needs met to have them perform the same way again. So it really is culturally a really narcissistic way to go about parenting.
It's kibbles and sticks, right?
Yeah.
It's just how you train puppies. And it is, and I could go probably in an hour-long rant about Super Nanny, but I won't. Just because she bungees in right late in the game after so many mistakes have been made. They've got to fix it in a week, and therefore it's just a brutal kind of retraining rather than a connection between parent and child. But anyway,
So that's just really an intro. Obviously, I'm not going to play their whole interview because it's like 49 minutes, but I just wanted to play a little of that because that's where really I'm kind of struggling with where and how far do you have to go. So to kind of set things up for tomorrow, it's really, there are a couple issues that I want to address. We'll get more into peaceful parenting because even when we talked about it as a freedom-oriented type of parenting or philosophy of parenting. But I didn't know as much about it as I do now as far as how far he goes. I did know that he didn't go as far when I talked about it before as, say, Dana Martin does with radical unschooling. So I may be somewhere in the middle of that. And, we'll talk more about that part of it as far as my personal experiences and where I see, if I have kids, what my parenting philosophy is. We'll talk more about that on Thursday. But really what I want to do tomorrow is, one, try to establish how far should one if we're looking at kids as people that own themselves, how far should it go, first of all? Now, the issue I really have is at certain ages. Once they're a teenager, to me, there's no question. So even, I think before that, I think 12 years old, people used to get married at 12 years old, and I know it's because you died at whatever age. But if you weren't mature enough to get married and have kids at that young, then even if you died at a certain age, then why not, then fine. Then you die when your kids are young and, I don't know, somebody takes care of them. I don't know. But even when they were still getting married at 13 and 14, they lived to be 40. So you could have got married at 20. So my point being is that I think what has been happening, and again, it all goes back to government. And I know some people think that I'm just, nuts, or maybe not nuts, but that just going back to government, it's just like, whatever, you don't know what you're talking about. But I think that government has set the tone socially for so many things and influenced so many things that they even want kids in college now to be treated like kids. So the same way that they were, now when you're a teenager, you're not an adult, but years ago you were, they want to up that even higher and higher. Now, they're not doing it from a legal standpoint, but it's almost like they're doing it from a cultural and social standpoint. And even if you look at, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and how people were looked at certain ages compared to now. So I see that totally as government influenced. I really do. But going back to, once you're 12 or 13, and it depends on the person, but again, from society and the way that they've influenced things, I think if it's also influenced kids that young to mature less or mature at a older age. They're not as mature now as, say, they were 20 years ago. I think at 13, 20 years ago, kids 13 now aren't as mature as they were. And yeah, I put that on government and the influence on society. But I think they have the capacity mentally, regardless of what, fucking doctors want to say or whatever. I know your brain is not fully developed until 25. So what do you want to do? Now say that, well, you're not an adult till you're 25. But my point being is that I know at that age you can make certain decisions. And that is not really the issue to me. It's, as far as self-ownership and being able to own yourself and make a lot of your own decisions. it's okay, when you're talking about little kids, how do you handle those situations? So one of the things that I'll probably play tomorrow, it's about 14 minutes, is Stefan Molyneux talking about his daughter when she was 3 and still not trying to force her to impose his will on her to get her to do something. So to get her to do something by using other methods, by talking to her about it and telling her, like, for example, you know, if you don't brush your teeth, you're going to get cavities and your teeth are going to fall out and you're going to have no teeth. And I'm just throwing that out there as a stupid example. But as opposed to saying you have to brush your teeth and you have to do it now. So my point is that it's easy in my mind that once you're, you know, and everybody develops at a different rate and at a different, some people are more mature than others, obviously, that you can be the same age and be more mature than somebody else. But I honestly think at 12 or 13 that if you think you can go out and fucking go get a job and you can't deal with living with your parents, then you should go be able to do it. And I know people will hear something like that and think that's crazy. The reason they'll think it's crazy, first of all, is because of the standards of society. Just like in Europe, there's no drinking age and there's no big deal if a fucking 10-year-old has a glass of wine at the table, where some people would think that's crazy, but it's not a big deal over there. One of the big problems, I think, is that, one, people don't have open minds, period. Nobody has an open mind, and I was going to say anymore, but I don't know that people ever did. It's just automatically, a lot of times, anger, or it's you're crazy and whatever. But no, I believe, you know, I don't think that's the thing to do. My point is just that government should have nothing to do with it. So if at 12, government shouldn't be able to stop you from leaving your house and going wherever the fuck you want to go and doing whatever you want to do. That's what I'm saying. Now, do I think that's the smartest thing to do? No, but maybe if you're in a situation where you're being abused, then maybe it is. And maybe you don't want to be in a foster home. But see, the whole thing is because of the fucking system, and this is kind of what I brought up before about, you know, a girl, you know, a teenage runaway prostituting herself, that at 12 years old, if you wanted to get a job and get a fucking apartment, you can't, because, and again, how many people would actually do that, first of all? And no one would actually look at that anyway, as far as when they think about it, they're not considering, okay, this would be for people in extreme circumstances that were in very bad homes that needed to get the fuck out. And most of them would probably move in with friends or something anyway, that their parents would take them in. But then to contribute, they could go get a job. Where now at 12 years old, unless you're paid under the table, I don't think you can get a job. And we actually talked about this on a show where I had Ellen Ball on, where we talked about, you know, kids' rights and things like that. So I really think when it comes to kids, period, that government, whether it exists or not, that there should be no CPS and there should be no government interference in your relationship with your kids and in parenting. Because what's going to happen, especially when people know that, that's the other thing that I think doesn't come into play or doesn't come into people's minds as well, is that they forget that people have friends and relatives and things like that. So, plus, if you could leave, it wouldn't matter anyway. So you'd get out of a situation. The only real danger would be with little kids. But that's, the same thing where friends and relatives and whatever. And what people want to do is they want to have, it's like you have 0.001% of the population that's fucked up. And because of that fucked up part of the population, you want to affect the other 99.9999 and apply all these stupid laws to them because of it. Because that's really what it is. But anyway, yeah, I don't think there should be an age of consent. And I'm not talking about sexual consent. I'm talking about an age of consent as far as 18 being an age where the government says you can leave or, any of that. I think that it shouldn't even exist because you think a 5-year-old's going to leave, where are they going to go? Or a little kid's just going to leave their parents? No, it's not going to happen. People's thinking has been so corrupted and so brainwashed and indoctrinated by government and the structure of society and how it should be, even though it was a certain way before, it was okay then. But then they decided to change it, so now you have to accept it as it is now. Not to say that it was better or worse before. I'm just making a point that you accept what it is as of when they say. So, again, I'm kind of getting a little off track here, but mainly what I wanted to talk about was based, I guess, on the current structure, because if you didn't have that structure, it would change a lot of things as well, meaning the structure of you have to be 18, but what is the solution or a solution or something that will help at least to lead to true freedom and liberty when it comes to the next generation? Because right now it's not happening. You do have quote unquote millennials that are involved in politics, but a lot of them see the problem but go to the solution of government and follow people like Bernie Sanders. They look to the same people who caused the problems in the first place, or at least allowed and contributed to the people that caused the problems, and that's who they look to. And who can blame them when they're brought up the way they're brought up and they go to government schools the way they are and they see what they see in the media essentially government media. So how do you change that? Because these kids that are being brought up now are going to be the ones that, you know, depending on whether the system exists as it exists now, which hopefully it doesn't, but are going to be the ones to start the next revolution, or are going to be the ones to change things from a society on the brink of fascism and socialism to true freedom and liberty. And there's not a lot of options at this point in general. And I'm not talking about there's not a lot of options to change the opinions of the next generation. I'm saying that there's not a lot of options to achieve true freedom and liberty, period, which we never had anyway in the first place. There was a level of freedom, and that level, you know, if you had a graph, you'd see that it was at a certain point. If you say 10 is true freedom and liberty, maybe it started at a 6 in the beginning and then just skewed down from the beginning. And just kept skewing down and down. And I don't know where it's at now. But I know that the government is doing everything they can to indoctrinate kids to ensure that the next generation falls in line with where they want them to fall in line, with government control, more of a police state, a military state, all of these things that they're training kids to become accustomed to now. So my question, I guess, or what I want to discuss tomorrow is peaceful parenting as well as radical unschooling. And between those, really, and it could be other things as well. I mean, other ideas on raising kids. But it has to be recognized that kids do own themselves. They're not owned by their parents, whether it's for the purpose of trying to get freedom in the future or not. I mean, that's just how it is. And parents need to realize that they don't own their kids, that they made a choice to have kids. So there's a lot of positive things about peaceful parenting, and there's a lot of positive things about radical unschooling. But then the other question is just because you're brought up that way and you're brought up in a way where you have freedom, at least as much as you can have as a kid, you know, you're given the maximum amount of freedom that your parents can give you. Of course, they can't stop the police or the government from doing whatever they want to do to you, but they can bring you up in a way that allows you to make your own decisions and choose what you want to do and not be told what to do and not be grounded and punished and all of these things. So before I get to my article, or how many articles I can cover in 20 minutes, those are the main things that I want to cover tomorrow. So we'll go through peaceful parenting. We'll go through radical unschooling. And I mean, a lot of things in both of them are similar. And it's not this is exactly what this is and this is exactly what this is. It's kind of everybody applies it differently. Everybody kind of has their own methods or their own ideas within the umbrella of freedom. And so we'll talk about those, and then we'll talk about because this is something I really didn't even think about. I thought about definitely you need to, or I'm not going to tell anybody what they need to do, but definitely that I believe kids should be raised as human beings and not property, and have the freedom of self-ownership and all of that. But the one thing I really didn't think about is just because they have that and they're brought up that way, does that necessarily mean that as an adult, they're going to support freedom and liberty? They're going to want that same freedom from the government that they got in their upbringing. Because you're only going to get so much anyway, because again, you're only getting what your parents can give you. Your parents can't stop the government, especially when you're a teenager and you go out and get harassed by the police or get arrested by them for doing nothing, and that happens as well, or get harassed, whatever. They can't stop that. They can only give you, whatever freedom within their house, and that's within their power. So that's an interesting question, that just bringing up somebody that way, does that necessarily mean that that's what they're going to believe in? If you bring somebody up as a statist, does that mean they're going to be a statist? Now, there's a difference, because I believe when it comes to freedom that you're talking about something that is good, that is something that people all over the world strive for, something that, why would you want to be controlled? So it's different in that sense. And you get kind of, I guess, a taste of freedom and what it is compared to other kids that don't have that. So I do know this, that bringing kids up without freedom and treating them like their property is just going to make things worse, and sending them to government schools at the same time as well. And I think that's a must, that along with the parenting, they have to be taken out of government schools and homeschooled. And that's just a given right there. So being that we've already gone 45 minutes over, I might as well go the last 15. I do have a number of articles that are important. So I guess I have time for one of them. So I'm trying to pick one out of the articles, like which is the most important, because they're all pretty important. Well, here's one from InfoWars, but it's also in other places as well. A New York cop who shot an unarmed man, was actually even found guilty, but given 5 years probation and no jail time. So I'm not even sure which shooting this was because there's so many of them, but this was in New York. I know that. So he was charged with manslaughter. He should have been charged with more than that. He could have been sentenced to 15 years in prison. Instead, because you have a system where the government is like one big organization that gets each other's backs. And even though they might fight amongst each other, I know the police fight with each other. The police may fight with the FBI or the FBI with the NSA or whatever. That's just internally. When it comes to publicly, they don't do that. They keep all that shit within. And they all get each other's backs when it comes to shit like this because they're all government. There is no separation of powers. I've said it a million times. If you want separation of powers, the only way you can have it is if the people have enough weapons as the government, or at least as the police, so they can defend themselves when the police violate their rights. Also as a deterrent that they won't violate their rights in the first place, because they know if they do, they're going to have a fucking war on their hands, or they're going to have, something's going to happen. But unless the people actually have power, it was such a fucking bunch of bullshit and such a lie, and a lie that just people ate it up. The lie that it's the people that run the government. It's the people's government. It was such a bunch of bullshit. Like, I remember somebody saying, and I think he just said it to piss me off, commenting on an article that I had posted about the police. And I said something about them and whatever. And he commented, well, aren't we the police? Aren't we the government? Aren't we the... No, we are not. Maybe you are. I know who that person is. He actually had a government job, so I guess he was. I'm not the government. There's no we. There's them. And there's everybody else. So, this is how fucked up this is. Rarely does a police officer even get charged. On top of that, they rarely even get convicted. And then they finally get convicted and they get probation and 800 hours of community service. It was Peter Liang. Here, I'll just read it's a short article, so I'll read it. A former police officer convicted in the shooting death of an unarmed man in a darkened stairwell was spared prison time Tuesday, and a judge reduced his manslaughter conviction to a lesser charge. Peter Liang was sentenced to 5 years probation and 800 hours of community service, although that's a lot of hours, but yeah, it's not jail. In the 2014 shooting of Gurley, I don't know, I can't really say his first name, who was walking down a stairwell in a public housing complex when the rookie officer fired a bullet in the dark by accident after being startled, he said. Really? The bullet ricocheted and killed Gurley, 28. So he said he accidentally fired a bullet when he was startled. I'm sure that's a bunch of bullshit. Given the defendant's background and how remorseful he is, it would not be necessary to incarcerate the defendant to have a just sentence in this case, Brooklyn State Supreme Court Justice Danny Chung said, and sentencing Liang, also 28. What does it mean, also 28? Oh, that they were, okay. That the officer and the guy he killed were 28. That's nice, because if it was the other way around and somebody accidentally killed a police officer, they're not going to say that. The judge is not going to say, oh, you know, he's really remorseful, so it's not necessary to put him in jail. It's crazy. Even if it wasn't a police officer, if it was just a regular person, they'd be in jail. But definitely not if it was a police officer. So, again, it shows that the government can do whatever they want. It's fine. If you're part of the government, you can get away with whatever you want because they're all a big gang, a big mafia that essentially gets each other's backs. This guy doesn't serve a day in jail. I'm sure he was out on bail. It doesn't say. But actually, there's, I think there's more to the article. It goes to another link. But even when the guy gets convicted, he gets charged. It's hard enough for somebody to get charged. He gets convicted, and he still doesn't serve a day in jail. 5 years probation. I know somebody that committed fucking, credit card fraud or something, and got 5 years probation. This guy fucking killed somebody. And he was a cop. He should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one. Although, of course, you know, that's what cops are. They're all low standard. So the judge actually reduced the charges from manslaughter to criminally negligent homicide. How many times does a judge actually do that for just a regular person? And I'm not talking about, you know, somebody who has money or a celebrity or something like that. I'm talking about just your average person. For me, they wanted me to go to jail for 60 days for obstruction of an officer because an officer came up to my car on private property with a gun pointed at my head and asked me to get out of my car, and I asked him, what did I do? And then dragged me out of my car, bruises all over me. In the law itself, it says you have to have intent to obstruct their investigation. I didn't even know they were fucking making an investigation. And I got found guilty by the judge. And the city attorney wanted me to go to jail for 60 days. And I had to pay a fucking $1,000, the maximum fine. This guy gets 5 years probation. And doesn't even have to pay any money. Now, I didn't get, you know, probation, but But my point being that when it comes to a cop or any member of the government, and when I say any member of the government, I don't necessarily mean like somebody that works at the post office or that works in that type of job. I'm talking about the government agencies, the law enforcement agencies, State Department, those type of people. And how long does this have to go on until people realize? Because this is not just about a cop killing somebody. This is about how fucked up the system of injustice is. That the court system, even though some idiots say, oh, it's the best system in the world. Again, if it's the best system in the world must be pretty fucked up. But it's not just about cops being out of control and cops murdering people. This is about a system of government where you have on top of above the government, you have another elite class of money, but the government itself is also an elite class of I can do whatever the fuck I want and get away with it. That's what they get as their, I guess, prize for, say prize, but because the people in the government aren't the ones running the government. And the cops are the enforcers for the people that are in the government. So they can't just throw their enforcement. Once in a while, they'll make an example of a cop, but very rarely. But they need their enforcers. So they don't want to just, throw them out there to dry. I don't know if that was even the proper analogy that I meant. Hang them out there to dry. So yeah, I mean, this isn't even just about a cop killing somebody. It's about being above the law. It's about this system. It's about this government. It's about all of it. But most people aren't going to read into that. They're not going to see it for what it really is. They're just going to see it for, oh, another cop killed somebody and got off. And yeah, that's part of it. And that's part of it that's really fucked up too. And the police need to go. And when I say need to go, I'm not talking about, hurting them. I'm saying like they need to be laid off. They're the enforcers of the government because that's how they enforce their bullshit laws. It starts with the police and then they have their other agencies. So that's why I started End the Government Police in my Facebook page. And please like it on Facebook. But we need to end the government police, which means no more police. They need to get another fucking job. And then what you have is based on what your needs are, there'll be plenty of security companies. People basically just need to be kept safe and protected, and that's it. And the police don't do that anyway. All they do is show up after the crime. So what the fuck is the point? oh, if there wasn't any police, I hate these fucking idiots who make these statements. Oh, if there weren't any police, you know, you'd be scared or you'd whatever, or people make these fucking ignorant ass statements. No, because police show up after the fact, you fucking morons. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more about, I guess I'll call it freedom parenting, and trying to raise your kids to be kids that own themselves and think for themselves and hopefully support freedom. And then on Thursday, Katie Reyes is going to guest host, and we're going to talk all about our personal experiences growing up with parenting and what we think, or how I guess we would raise our future kids. What are our parental philosophies, I guess. So that should be a fun show on Thursday as well as tomorrow. So hopefully some of you motherfuckers will listen live and call in. But thanks everybody for listening. I appreciate it. And have a good night.
The way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.